Yes, the zombies are back now and they're ready to test. They'll take that development code and tear it from your chest. Refactor your mind, take the test and red to green. All with an undead beam.
You're watching Rails testing for zombies, and this is level 3, where we're going to be cleaning up some of the code we wrote in level 2. So let's get started. Here's the code where we tested the tweets association, and here's the code where we tested the avatar URL method. You may notice that there's some duplication going on here, and if there's anything we like doing as Ruby developers, it's keeping it dry. We don't like repeating ourselves. So how might we refactor this so we don't have to write z equals zombies ash every time? So let's move this line of code up into a setup method. This setup method by default is going to get run before every test. In order to have this variable accessible, we need to make an instance variable. So we're going to add that @ symbol up at the top, and then add that @ symbol in front of the variable wherever we use it. Let's take a look at 2 more tests that we might figure out some way to refactor. Here we're testing that we have an error message when name is blank. We also need another test for the graveyard validation to ensure that the graveyard field can't be blank. Again, there's a lot of duplication going on here. Each of these is testing if it's valid and then testing to see if the right error message exists. So let's refactor. Let's take those 2 lines. We're going to bring them up into another method we're going to call assert presence. It's going to have 2 parameters, model and field. We're going to check to see if the model is valid. We're then going to get all of the errors on that specific field. That'll return an array. We'll join that array together to a single string, which will match against that regular expression. Then we'll create a custom failure message, which says presence error for field not found on model class. Then in our tests, all we have to do is call that method, assert presence for z, and then the name column, and then assert presence z, and then the graveyard column. Sweet, we've refactored this code, but you may have noticed something. The way that we refactored this, it would be nice to be able to use this in other models that also validate presence and need to test against that. So instead of having it in the zombie test, let's move it up into the test helper. With this method in our test helper, we'll have access to it from any of our test files. Now I want to introduce you to our first external test gem called shoulda. Shoulda makes tests easy on the fingers and the eyes. It will allow us to write less code and get more done. So in order to install it in our Rails application, we simply need to add a line to our gem file. We only want this gem to be available in the test environment. That's why we have group test do. To test one of our presence validations with shoulda, instead of doing what we did a minute ago, we can just write a single line, should validate presence of, and then we send in a symbol, which is the column name. So inside of our zombie test, we just write should validates presence of name. We might have should validate presence of graveyard, should ensure length of name is at most 15. And these are all shoulda helper methods. You can look up in the documentation to get a list of all of them, but they all test exactly what they say they test. It should have many tweets. A couple other ones that are really helpful, should validate uniqueness of, should ensure length of, and you can chain on extra methods like is at least 5, is at most 20, should validate numericality of for a column that has to be numeric, should not allow value blah for email, should allow value for an email address, should ensure inclusion of, should not allow mass assignment of, because obviously you don't want to allow mass assignment of the password field, that would be bad, should belong to zombie for the relationship, and lastly should validate acceptance of terms of service, in this case for a Boolean field. To get more information on shoulda and to look up the documentation so you can reference all of these matchers I showed you a second ago, be sure to check out the link down below this video. And that pretty much wraps up level 3. It was a short one because I want you guys to get better at writing tests, refactoring your tests, and using shoulda. Good luck.